would be, and it's not big, it's actually very small, is adding a light client sync committee to add light client support as a first-class citizen. It's pretty much reusing all types of infrastructure we've already used, signature aggregation, subnets, that kind of stuff, but for this particular type of committee that changes more slowly. So keep your eye on that. Probably in January we might release some test vectors for that if people want to begin building. But I also know that there are optimizations and stability things that people are still working on. As the mainnet gets bigger, we want to make sure we stay stable. Any other testing updates? Would be, and it's not big.
Quick note about API.
Is adding a light client committee.
I've been working on API bindings for the standard API
it's pretty much reusing
as well as test vectors, and trying to
types of infrastructure we've already
run
used,
through the full service of the Lighthouse API.
Subnets, that kind of stuff.
If anyone else is working on bindings or likes to talk about API tests, then
so keep your eye on that. Probably in January we might release some tests. Great, thanks.
Can those bindings be generated from the definition?
So there's two parts to this, server tests and client tests. For the client tests, I run through a whole lot of variants that's called the server, collect request and response data, then mock that interaction, test the bindings. Server testing is more complicated since it depends on lots of dynamic conditions. I'm checking stats codes right now. I'm checking the format of each of these responses to make sure things are right. But then again, it's a lot more to go through with server testing. We can talk about that in Discord.
The definition.
Cool. Anything else on that? I also think we're probably inches away from a release on those APIs. I know it's something I need to get back engaged with, but if you are regularly engaged with APIs, if there are any kind of open issues or anything else that you want to see before this release, now's the time. Okay, cool. Testnet, mainnet, Piermont looks good. Mainnet looks good. Again, congratulations. It's been a wild ride. Any comments, thoughts, anything here?
I have a question. Has there been a discussion on starting a test net, but with finality disabled? I'm asking that because of there's lots of great lesson learned during the non-finality at the Piermont, and definitely client made a lot of optimizations around there, but I feel like we can use more optimizations.
Yeah, I agree. Some of us were discussing this morning on either, we were discussing it from an angle of like just running some load tests and seeing what we find, but an extended testnet, devnet without finality might make sense. Justin, you have some thoughts?
No, I was just going to say that, yeah, I agree. It's high priority, and it's, I mean, for those who may not know, we onboarded Paritosh, the Ethereum Foundation, helping, at the intersection of DevOps and security. And, that's one of the things that we really want to prioritize, a testnet with no finality.
Yeah, just a survey, I'm curious, in terms of client performance, if there's no finality but incredible stability, is that a tough scenario, or is it when there's no finality and also a reasonable amount of forking or orphans and things? Where does the load in your estimation become induced here?
I think when there is a forking and non-finality, clients will not prune the DAG in memory, and then you will have usage.
Right. So, but in the assumption, if there was zero forking, do you have the same issue?
No pruning, but since we don't have forks to keep in memory, that's I suppose.
Okay. So it might make sense also, if we're going to do this, to have some subset of the nodes maybe have a clock skew so they regularly are getting blocks orphaned to try to capture some of the load in a more loadful manner. Anything else on this? Definitely something I think we should discuss in the coming couple of weeks and maybe target for early January.
I think another interesting case is long periods where there are no blocks at all. I mean, when Prism had the rough time issue, we didn't have any blocks for, I think, maybe 2 epochs, was it? 3 epochs? I don't remember right now the numbers, but there was a good test for the sync protocol to ensure that we can handle an entire epoch without blocks correctly.
Yeah, I gotcha. That kind of stuff's also on the list of some load tests that we're like to engage with. But we could also induce that on like a public DevNet, I suppose. Everyone turn your nodes off. Everyone turn your nodes back on. Okay, cool. Anything else on this?
Can we talk about future of testnets in general? Getting lots of questions in about whether it's the one, is it long-lived, or will there be something else? Any thoughts?
So my intuition, and I'm happy to waver on this depending on what people think, but my intuition is Piermont works, and at least probably through the end of January, I don't see any reason to disrupt it. Obviously, that doesn't mean it's quote the one. There are some techniques at our disposal to ensure that a testnet stays more stable, and we haven't. The only thing that we really have at Piermont right now is we ask people to not spam it, and we run 100,000 validators. This may be enough for a while, but ultimately, like it might just degrade. And so we can start a testnet with a much higher ejection balance, like the Prism guys did many months ago, probably a year ago. And we could also tune the leak parameters to ensure that the network, even if it has a little bit of instabilities, kind of stabilizes more quickly. We can also alter the queue links to kind of have a higher quality of service so that people can get in, although then you're now changing the user experience from mainnet, so maybe that's not a great thing. Maybe changing the exit queue, but that's actually not easy to tune independently of the activation queue. So there's some stuff to discuss about what we would do in that testnet, but my intuition is essentially probably Piermont's good enough for the next 2-3 months, but we should consider our options and maybe do a fresh start next year, Q1, Q2. But that's just my opinion right now. I don't know. What do people think on this?
Alter the queue links to.
Yeah, since I asked the question, it sounds good to me. I think it's because 2-3 weeks ago we were talking about taking a view on this, and people just want to know where they stand. I think you're right. Piermont is serving the function at the moment.
Does anyone else have any strong opinions on what we might do here? Okay, so I think Piermont serves the purpose right now. We'll keep our eye on it through New Year and keep an open mind towards how we might have a more stable testnet in the future if and when Piermont degrades. Mami, you had something?
Yes. One thing is that per month, in a month, will start being quite slow to sync, and we might want to have the weak subjectivity sync in place. Well, in a month also.
Yeah, agreed. And I know Piermont's a higher load than mainnet as well, but that's probably a good thing rather than a bad thing. But you're right, yeah. To weak subjectivity sync from a recent state is probably a pretty high value feature, not just from security but from a UX standpoint to get out in the next couple months. Okay, anything else here?
Well, I'd only add that we'll be on mainnet where Piermont is not too long from now, because we never prune the validator set even when they exit. So
right, although I expect pretty low exits on mainnet.
Yeah, but nonetheless,
yeah,
it'll happen.
Yeah, I mean, and there's multiple types of load, right? One is that validator set, even if exits happen, grows in memory. But if exits happen and the validator set is half of what you have in the registry, the active validator set, then that doesn't induce as much load on networking side. So there's a few different angles there. Yeah. Okay. Client updates. Let's start with Nimbus.
Okay, so mainnet launch. We have following that a couple of things to done. In particular, documentation. But we still have work to do there to try to clarify, because right now it's very detailed. We have a hotfix yesterday. We have another one scheduled today. So people using Nimbus keep track of our Discord, and we'll put in place mailing lists and hash of releases for security. We want to thank our supporters, in particular those who supported us on Gitcoin over a year ago. We still thinking about you, and we'll have something for you soon. And otherwise, on the software side, we are still using import and export of slashing databases, the V3. So we plan to do V5 soon. And on the networking side, we for the launch, we raised the number of peers requested by default from 79 to 160. Which had a very good impact because we have now a much better attestation inclusion delay. Usually it's 0 now. One thing we are concerned with is that over time, we see a drop of Lighthouse clients while peer connection, while Teku and Prism are stable. Also not related directly to Nimbus, but for everyone benefits. The team at BLST, they released a very significant improvement to the square root function, which implies a benefit of 40% on the hash2G2. And since this is almost a third of verification, this should translate to 15% perf improvement for every client using BLST. And that's it for me.
Nami, is that improvement in the latest release? Was it 0.3.1 or is that?
So I'm putting a link right now. This was released 16 hours ago.
Super, thank you.
Very cool. Lodestar.
Hey, so we finally got our BLST integration out the door. Working closely with their team, they were very helpful. We did something similar to a lot of the other teams where we can create a common interface between BLST and Harumi's library, so we can use BLST in Node.js and Harumi in the browser. We're working on getting the BLST to compile to WASM. Of course, it's not going to use the super fast assembly, but we're very curious to see what the performance is going to be like between Harumi compiled to WASM and BLST WASM. So we'll keep everyone informed when we get some results on that. Other than that, we did finally cut a release day before mainnet. I would say that let's start at experimental level robustness. We do have some nodes on mainnet, and they're staying synced. There's some few performance issues that are still kind of plaguing us. 100% CPU usage, verifying a bunch of aggregate proofs, but staying on the network. So yeah, that's it for us.
Cool. And you're not attached. You don't have validators attached to those nodes right now.
No economic value attached to those nodes. We need to do a lot more testing on Piermont and other things.
So I suppose it's just an end user node. You don't even need to listen to the aggregate and proof channel, although it helps you in some like censorship resistance scenarios. But it's probably worth listening to that channel to induce the load and figure out how to optimize it.
Right. Yeah, just from a read-only kind of beacon node, staying up to the head, seems pretty stable right now.
Nice. Cool. Congrats.
Thanks.
Let's do Prism.
Hey guys, so yeah, mainnet launched. Before mainnet, we were mostly working on our documentations, mainnet readiness, fixing user-reported bugs. We have 2 or 3 patch releases from that. And so thank you to our users and contributors for working with us on that. And post mainnet, for this week, next week, we'll be working on import and export of validated client exchange format. That's the #1 priority right now, which we don't support. And in parallel, we're working on with subjectivity sync from the checkpoint state, and also working on implementing the E2 API. And that's it. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Let's do Teku.
Right, that is me. So we have released this week's Subjectivity Checkpoint Sync feature, so you can pass an initial state to Teku via the CLI, and you can start your sync from there. So this is a great user experience win, never mind the weak subjectivity side of things. If you can get a recent state from a node that you know is reliable, you can be up and running in under a minute. So it's great for cold standby and stuff like that. Anyway, Meredith has made a great video that demos this and explains the long-range attack issue very nicely, which ought to be out soon. So keep an eye out for that. We've also implemented a historical sync that will backfill the blocks from Genesis up to the initial state that you specify. In other news, we fixed an issue where our attestation sometimes failed on the first slot of an epoch on Piermont. It's a kind of race condition where we'd get the wrong source on occasion, so the attestation doesn't get included. We have a remaining issue about delayed block production after epoch processing. We're fixing this. It doesn't affect mainnet at all at its current scale. It seems to be just the scale of Piermont that exposes this. We also fixed an issue where we failed to gossip voluntary exits and slashings. We now gossip both correctly. I'm aware of the conversations about gossiping slashings or not, but we do that now by default. And the main work in the last 3 or 4 days around mainnet launch has been finding ways to pull data more reliably from ETH1 nodes on mainnet. Turns out it's very different from Gurley. There's lots of geth around on slow drives or limited resources. We've had to work around Nethermind and Open Ethereum not downloading chain history or not providing the data in ETH-get block events. So we're just finishing up the last testing of our fixes for that. As a workaround, we've been recommended to any users that have trouble just spending 10 minutes syncing up with Infura before switching over to their own ETH1 node, as the load is much lighter after the initial catch-up. Aside from small bug fixes and bits and pieces, that's it from Teku.
Awesome. Great work. I'm excited to see that video. And I'll mention this in the networking video. I know there's the open issue on exactly how to do backfill and sync and stuff if you're starting from that state. And I will take a look at it. I'll open that back up today and we get it merged. And Lighthouse. Is there anyone from Lighthouse here? Yeah, cool. They launched on mainnet as well and seem to be running okay. And we will catch up with them later. And Tomas, you're joining us today. Do you have any updates on your end you'd like to share? Oh, all good. Okay. Research updates. Anybody have anything for us?
So sorry, Diane. It takes me ages to unlock the phone to be able to speak.
All good.
Like entering the passwords and searching the unmute. No, sorry, I joined mostly to hear about what's the follow-up, the feedback, what kind of problems you had with Ethereum 1 nodes. So our Ethereum 2 obviously is on hold, and obviously congratulations to everyone, as I said, on the channels as well. And yeah, I just listen.
Okay, cool. Is there any particular comment you'd like to make about Nethermind in this context, or any questions for Tomas while we're here? Okay.
I do have a question. So I saw on Reddit that a full, a Nevermind node that can be used to serve the ETH1 monitoring would only take 45 or 60 gigabytes. That was in 2019. How much? Because since we target
100 gigabytes now.
Okay, so this is still much better than Geth at 300 gigabytes, or TurboGeth, I think, is also in the same range.
Yeah, for the minimal support. So what you need for minimal support is the receipts since the deposit contract was deployed on Ethereum 1 network. So this is 11,050,000 blocks. So Teku had this trouble because they were doing binary search where they had reasonable approach to just find that deployment of the contract by searching when it appears. But if you hard code it, then you know that you don't need any receipts from the past. And what you need is just like 10, 15 gigabytes of headers, around 30 gigabytes of receipts from the recent history, and 60 gigabytes of state. And this is the absolute minimum to support Ethereum 2.
Gotcha. Okay, anything else here? Nethermind, ETH1 syncing, that kind of stuff before we move on.
Is anyone working on on infrastructure to remove the requirement for the ETH1 node, where we have this super light client that just syncs the headers, and then we have an ad hoc gossip network specifically for the deposits and the Merkle associated Merkle paths. It would be just so much lighter than the current situation for validators.
A follow-up. Has anyone experimented with using the LES protocol? The light protocol?
We were trying to implement LES in Nethermind, but obviously there is this good question for Ethereum 2 clients. So, sorry, the BeamSync client potentially can serve all your requests, and it would be smaller in a way that it could go down to 40 gigs if we just BeamSync to the recent state and download receipts. And we are working on it for hotkey support, and it also would work with Ethereum2. So it can actually go a bit below what we have now. And with Trinity team, we working on the witness protocol that actually the BeamSync can exchange information much faster with the nodes in the network. So it can go below that. As for the last client, light client syncing, if it requires receipts from the past, then obviously it will be heavy download of the receipts. You need to have it. Unless someone like delivers verifiable, provable bundles of receipts, historical receipts for Ethereum2 just for the deposit contract. So this would be other approach to just be able to download those and get them verified, maybe store them somewhere and be able to trust that this is the correct bundle.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's move on to some research updates.
Short note about weak subjectivity stuff. There's a new weak subjectivity calculation wherein the period also depends on the average validator balance. There's a branch for it expected to get merged in the next release. On a different note, Alex and I have been working on this slashing protection rebuild thing, where it uses a few different methods to rebuild the slashing protection interchange file. We actually did not know that clients don't support v5 of the slashing interchange format yet. But if there's any other nuances that we should know about, please let us know. It also uses the ETH2 API, so it's super important that clients support all of that infrastructure for software upwards in the stack.
Cool. Other research updates.
So I have a couple of PRs in progress, and so there has been that light client one, which I think, well, most recently I saw Xiaowei has been doing a lot of work on trying to make it executable, and I've been reviewing that just now. The second one is the incentive accounting reforms. So that is well, I will just get the PR number for that right now at 2140. And the goal there is to basically take some of these simplifications to rewards that we had in the big, humongous phase 1 candidate and just move them over to a separate patch, which could potentially be included much more quickly. So the goal was to get rid of pending attestations and basically replace them with a bit field data structure. And this should simplify the spec, increase efficiency of accounting things, and also set the stage for things that I think would be good to do later, but that I haven't yet written the specs for, which is basically there's a couple of kind of wish list items I have. One is to redesign the spec a bit so that empty epochs and long strings of empty epochs don't have O of n per epoch processing time. The second is reforming how the inactivity leak works. And then the third is potentially using polynomial commitments or other magic to remove most of the Merkling overhead from from epoch transitions. So that stuff's longer term, but like in addition to just being like simplifying and making it easier to add more incentives in the future, that's another thing that this PR is designed to kind of set the stage for in the long term. So the PR exists, and the longer term things that I mentioned, they all exist as kind of scattered issues as well. But I'll probably write a more and publish a more coherent document that just talks about all of that stuff.
quick comment there, more implementation focused. All or most clients are already optimizing the epoch transition in a way that's very similar, where it first collects the stats data of all the validators of the previous two epochs, and then does all the reward calculations. So this change there with the bit field may not actually be that big. Technical even is looking at implementing that optimization to improve their epoch transition times.
Okay. In that case, you might even end up just simplifying the code by a lot, because the data structure that makes sense from an efficiency perspective would also just be the data structure that gets hashed. Yeah.
Great. Any other updates?
Yes, the executable beacon chain proposal has been published. Thanks everybody for the great feedback. There are some pain points to address, like block hash issue, some others. We'll keep working on them. In the meantime, the prototyping is already in progress, so soon, likely soon, we'll see a Teco client with one execution in it. Guillaume is also working on updating Catalyst. So the prototype the goal is to implement and evaluate the core proposal. Yep, and probably run a testnet in the midterm. So that's
Cool.
it.
Thanks, Mikhail. Other updates here?
One quick update is some good news regarding BLST. So an optimization was found for doing square roots over extension fields, and that means that the hash to G2 is going to be 40% faster. So quite a significant and nice optimization there.
Yeah, Mami mentioned that in the Nimbus update. Maybe you were away from the computer. Which translates into a 15% speed update on signature verification, I think he said.
Yeah, because my benchmarking H2G2 is 1/3, because you have H2G2 then pairing, and it's 1/3, 2/3 in terms of proportions, time spent.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah. Killer library. Thanks, Supernational. Okay. Other updates here?
Yes, just very quickly, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. With respect to the figures, so that I showed last meeting, we have written a document, kind of showing all the things we found, and it relates to many of the things that we discussed at the beginning of this meeting. So how clients perform during periods of finality, when there is a long period of no blocks and these kind of things. So I have shared this with some of you, and I already got some feedback, so thank you for those that gave feedback. If not, then we are always waiting and very happy to have feedback. And if somebody here didn't receive the document yet and you would be interested, please contact me so that we'll be happy to share it with you. Thanks.
Cool, thanks. Anything else? Okay, great. Networking. Some of us have been discussing having a networking call next week to kind of catch up to speed on all the various things. It's tentatively Wednesday morning. I'm going to look at the calendar and put it on the calendar right after this call. I know I mentioned earlier there's a standing PR with some comments that we still need to be addressed on leak subjectivity in the context of sync and what is a good and bad node in this respect. And I will get to those comments today, and hopefully we can get that merged relatively soon. Are there any other pressing networking items people would like to bring up right now? Otherwise, we'll have a longer form conversation in about a week. Okay.
Yeah, I would perhaps just repeat that it's good not to have very low peer settings. Overall, that makes it difficult to find, to form a suitable mesh on all the attestation topics that we're supposed to subscribe to. Makes it harder to find clients, and it kind of degrades the network performance in general. So hoping that users that listen to this, just keep your max peer settings reasonable and not something like 30 that will significantly degrade your attestation performance.
Right.
By reasonable, I mean in the range of 70, 80, 100.
Gotcha. Anything on networking before we move on?
So about pairing, there was this recent issue or kind of improvements we could make to connecting and onboarding. Is this where the client should not be strictly dial gating at the exact maximum of their pairing, but rather keep some buffer or some kind of elasticity to allow for new pairs to join them, even then slowly rotating them out or handling this churn in some way or another. That this would help on kind of situation of mainnet where one or two client types make onboarding others rather difficult.
Right, so essentially allowing for elasticity on the upper end and then on some interval pruning down to a target number rather than having a hard limit of a target number. Okay. Anything else on networking before we move on? Great. General spec discussion. Any questions, comments, thoughts here?
I mean, if we wants to talk more about some of the things that I mentioned, always happy to talk in more detail too. This is around changes to incentive accounting and then empty epoch optimizations and a couple of other types of optimizations.
Yeah, any questions here for Vitalik?
Maybe I'll just like publish this a more readable all-in-one place document so people have something to refer to and we can also talk about things. Well, although I do think that we should start some of those discussions sooner rather than later as well, and especially if we want to move toward having having some of these things in a hard fork in a fairly reasonable amount of time.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think if you get it into a digestible format, people read it.
Okay, I will do this.
I have a question regarding the phase 1 and phase 2 spec. Well, everything after phase 0. What's the state of the spec and the tests? Calls will likely dedicate now people to those phases, and we'd like to start with some low-hanging fruit, let's say.
Right. So the big things that are being in R&D right now are the data availability sharding and merge spec, both of which I think are going to probably spend the next 4 weeks doing some testing and refinement of the ideas, at which point I think we'd start seeing them form into more concrete specs. On the data availability stuff, there's kind of two components here. Well, there's a number of components here, but we'll likely be leveraging past lookups in a DHT. We'll be leveraging some new cryptography called Kate commitments, and be needing to kind of manage additional validator duties and some extended beacon chain spec items, and block, essentially managing blocks in parallel to the beacon chain.
So before we can do, for example, Kate commitments, we would need to push the BLS library implementers to expose the group operations.
We already have those.
So that would be one thing. Huh?
They expose everything already.
Not last time I checked. At least BLS, BLST, and Harumi, and many others, like they don't expose the basic operations. They expose only the signing infrastructure.
No,
which is not enough, basically.
Actually, they do expose even the FP, FP2, FP6, FP12, G1, and G2.
Right. I mean, the question is whether you can do like multiplications and additions in G1 and G2. That's the main thing you need.
Yes, we can.
And general pairings. Then you can start. But at least last time I checked with BLS, like BLST, I couldn't do it in Python.
Okay, comment. So it depends on the bindings, what is exposed. Rumi in Go exposes quite a lot, but not quite everything. And then BLST in Go is quite limited.
So the bindings are limited in the exposure, but the underlying BLST library isn't necessarily.
Well, no, the library can do everything. Like you need to be able to do these things. But yeah, like the question is whether it's in the API.
I mean, there are questions here around how to design the API to make the best use of the library, because sometimes the binding, can have quite a bit of overhead, and you want to minimize communication, for example, between the binding and the core. But yeah, that's a discussion we can push forward with Supranational, trying to design an API that makes sense and implement it for all the bindings.
Another thing to think about is that we are going to need like specific BLS things optimized for Kate-based data availability sampling. Probably the two most important ones are, one is fast linear combinations, aka multi-exponential